There we go. All right. Okay, so taking a look at halacha chaf gimel. Utzrichim ha'edim lihizaher ma'od ma'od shelo lachtom ela al davar shera'u be'eineihem. The witnesses have to be very, very careful. Ma'od ma'od, he says, to only sign on something that they actually saw with their own eyes. Be'inyan sheyocholim leha'id b'fnei beis din b'torat edut, such that if they were called to testify in court, they would be able to reliably testify about what they actually saw. Ki chatimatam bishtar hi ki'ilu me'idim b'fnei beis din. He says, because whenever you sign a contract as a witness, it is as if you are testifying in front of beis din. In other words, that's what the Gemara had said, that once witnesses sign, it's as if they were cross-examined in beis din. L'kach tzrichim lihizaher ma'od shelo yihiyeh davar sheker be'idutam b'shum tzad ba'olam. And therefore, they have to be very careful. Again, he's using this ma'od. Apparently, he must have had a bad experience. They have to be very careful to make sure that there is not even an aspect of falsehood at all in their testimony. Kagon. So he's going to give us an illustration. Someone wants to borrow money from a friend, but the loan isn't ready to be lent out just now, but he wants to get the promissory note all ready, all set up. Umakdim v'notein shtarchov alav, umamino she'im lo yilvehu yachzir lo hashtarchov. And basically, the debtor is a very trusting man, the borrower, and he tells the lender, the creditor, he says, listen, you hold on to this promissory note. I trust you that you're only going to use it to collect if you actually lend me the money. If you don't lend me the money, for whatever reason, just give me back the note. But I want you to have it in hand so that whenever you do have the money available, we don't have to worry about all the paperwork. You just have the paperwork in advance. So he says, Asr le'idim lachtom al shtarchov zeh. The witnesses are not permitted to sign such a promissory note, even though it's very convenient, even though the borrower is asking them to sign it. He says they are not allowed to do so. V'im chatmu harehem k'me'idim sheker. And if they do sign it, it is as if they are bearing false testimony in court. V'gam hala asr lo lekabel shtar zeh. And furthermore, the lender is not even permitted to accept such a promissory note, because the promissory note is a record of the generation of a loan. But this didn't happen. V'im kiblo asr lahashoto b'toch beito. And if he did accept it, he's not allowed to hold on. He's not allowed to allow it to stay within his home. Mishum shenamar, because what would happen if the guy drops dead and then his heirs find the promissory note and they're going to say, what's this? Pay up, right? Mishum shenamar va'al tashkein be'ohalecha avla. As it says in the book of Eov, do not allow to dwell in your tents any perversity. So this is perverse, right? This is a corruption. V'lo amru bishtar chov she'in bo kinyan shemuter la'idim lichto v'lachtom v'liten liyad halove kishemasro lahamalve bifnehem bo bayom. He says, and the Talmud, which does allow a promissory note to be drawn up even when there's no kinyan enacted, and the Talmud does allow witnesses to sign that and to have the borrower hold on to it, but that's only when the lender is present and the borrower gives it to the lender in their presence on that self-same day. That's the only time it'll be permitted for them to actually sign it, even perhaps before the document is passed over. So either the loan has to already have been made, or the loan was done in their presence, O shelo yalvehu klal v'hu mechayev et atzmo b'shtar chov zeh b'torat matana. Or, let's say the debtor is not borrowing money at all, but he just wants to give a gift. He wants to generate a debt to the creditor as a gift and say to him, I'm going to owe you such and such amount of money as a gift. I want to give you a gift for your wedding. So this is almost like a gift certificate. I don't have it now, but this gift certificate will entitle you to collect, such and such an amount. He says that witnesses are allowed to sign on, even though there's no loan made, because he's generating a debt by giving him the paper. And it could be because of some benefit that the debtor is acquiring in exchange, or that he hopes to acquire in the future. So that's when the witnesses are permitted to sign, when they know that there's an actual loan taking place, or when there's no loan taking place, but the debtor wishes to generate a debt as a gift. So ucheshechotmin al mesiras moda'a shekasuv bo, and when they sign on the sort of acknowledgement of the debt, where it's written on it, hikarnu ba'onso yizoharu ma'ot shelo yismoch alav ela im ken yodim me'atzman b'biur onso. Now this is a second scenario, which is when ucheshechosmin al mesiras moda'a. Now this is a situation where a borrower or a person who creates a debt asks witnesses, do me a favor, guys. I am under duress, and it's for that reason that I had to commit myself to give a gift to so-and-so. He put pressure on me, and he threatened me, and therefore I'm giving him a gift. But now that the guy's gone, I hereby notify you that this was given under, or this was done under duress. It was not something that I wanted to do, and I'd like you to sign this piece of paper so that I can bring it to Beis Din. Now, what the Rav Shulchan Aruch is saying is, the witnesses have to know that he was under duress. They can't just sign and say, we can't just take your word. And he says, Yizaru ma'od shelo yismach alav ela im kein yodim me'atzman b'biur onso. They can't just rely on his word. They have to know for a fact that this man is indeed under duress. Okay. Well, either the witnesses have to actually have seen the threat, or they have to know that perhaps the person that he's giving the gift to is a known. Well, I think this is a second case. This is a second case where they may not have signed the original shtar, but they know that this fellow has promised to do something or has committed himself in some way. We don't know exactly the circumstances yet, but then he turns to the witnesses and says, please sign this paper that says that I did so under duress and I want to reverse it. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. It's in a couple of different Gemaras. Yeah. Okay. Ki chasimasam bishtar iki'ilu meidim. They have to be, the reason why they have to be very careful to only sign on things that they know to be correct is because when they sign on a piece of paper, it's as if they're offering testimony in court. And so therefore, if the Beis Din were to ask you, did you see this exchange of money? And if they can't answer in the affirmative, they can't sign the shtar. All right, so harei shtar pasul. The ba'inan shahaksiva yihiyeh kodem lachasimasa. And therefore, it's a shtar pasul if they sign before the debt is generated, because the writing has to precede their signatures. V'hu adin b'shtar shel ksav yado, adin came. And similarly, when a person writes his own shtar and signs his own name, the same halacha is true. Shim chasam techila v'yachar kach kosav l'mayla shadi kenuya lach lo mo'il v'lo klum. So for example, let's say a person signed a blank page, and then above it he writes, I hereby am selling my field to you. I'm hereby transferring ownership of my field to you. This is not a valid bill of sale. So, in other words, and I don't know how you prove that in secular law. How can, it's very difficult to know, but halachically, if a signature was put on a blank piece of paper and then the rest was filled up above, that would not be a legally valid document, could not be upheld in Beis Din. No, I'm not so sure about that, because their signature is basically saying, I'm giving you whatever amount you would like to take from my account. It's different. Right, blank piece of paper doesn't specify anything.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, right. It's a form. That's right.
That's the check. You agree to the general agreement with the specific terms that filled in later.
I think this is fine.
Right. Well,
So
the question is, what level of detail would have to be filled in before it would be permitted to sign? Okay. And he says, Mishum de'ena chasima gomeres, hein chasimas edem, hein chasimas yado, elala acher ksiva. He says, because the signature, whether it's his own signature or the witness's signature, is not legally binding unless it's following the writing of the contract. There's another opinion that says you could be machshir a signature that was written before the body of the contract. The dafka imlo chasmu l'shem chasima shel edus klal o shelo chasmu al zeh ha'inyan efshir depasul. It's only if the witnesses were not aware that their signatures are being used for a contract, right? That's when we say that it's pasul. Aval im chasmu atzmam l'shem edus al zeh ha'alva apshik savo achar kach hashtar ein lepaslo v'tzarchi modina. But if the witnesses signed their names on a piece of paper for a loan that they actually witnessed, but the text was not written up yet, some say that that's kosher. As long as they're testifying properly, as long as they can come later to the Beis Din and said, yes, we saw the loan. And yet, well, then the Beis Din would show them the contract, and they would say, is this your signature? Is this what happened? And they could say yes. So this is a dispute among the poskim whether this works or not. But one thing that certainly won't work is for the witnesses to sign on a loan that allegedly took place when it hasn't yet taken place. That's what they're not allowed to do, because they're bearing false testimony. Okay. Ki'ilu me'idim bifnei, based on it, whenever they sign their names, it's as if they're testifying in court. V'im chasam b'shtar sheker, nifsal misha'as chasima ki'ilu heyid edus sheker bebeis din. If a person does sign on a bogus contract, then from the moment that he signed the contract, he has the status of a puzzle witness. Notice he now bears the stigma of someone who's now disqualified from being a kosher witness. I think it's forever unless we can verify that he's done tshuva. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me just finish this text. ואין זה כשולח עדוס לבית דין בכתב ידו דלא מועיל מטעם דבעינן מפיהם ולא מפקסבם. He says, don't think that just by signing it, it's as if your testimony has been taken in Beis Din, because after all, we know that a person cannot testify by written letter to a Beis Din. Testimony has to be taken orally. He says, no, the shiny star, the havi kimi pihem. It's because the Talmud derives from the psukim that whenever you sign a contract, it's as if you were standing in front of a Beis Din and you have offered oral testimony. Go ahead, Paul.
Just say, I would specify, say, I owe this person money because I want to give him a gift, as opposed to referring to a loan.
Yeah, there's no reference to a loan. There's no reference to a loan. That doesn't say that on such and such a date, Shimon borrowed money from Reuven. It just says that on such and such a date, a kinyan was made to require Shimon to pay X amount of money to Reuven. It doesn't mention. Yeah. Yeah, but you could just say the witnesses have to testify to an actual kinyan that was made. And there would have to be some level of consideration, which is the legal term for it, that they can actually demonstrate that there's a quid pro quo, that there's a reason why the person wishes to give over this gift to the other person. So, yeah, I believe so. I believe that's the function of the kinyan. What the kinyan does is that when Shimon gives his pen or his handkerchief to Reuven lifts it up and says, that's tantamount to consideration. And it's in exchange for that I hereby gift to or generate a debt to Reuven that I'm going to give him $100,000 or whatever the amount. Well, a will is different because the mechanism of a will only takes effect post-mortem. So, yeah, correct. That's the point. It's not a regular promissory note. A promissory note is a debt that's generated from now. There is no debt, and therefore a person could change his will multiple times, and no one can claim. Yeah. Okay. That's right. Okay. Asur le'edim lachtom, the witnesses are not allowed to sign even if the debtor requests it of them. Umayri davka hecha shelo kanu miyado. But that's only when a kinyan was not generated. But let's say the debtor makes a kinyan and he basically says, I hereby state before you that I'm going to owe Reuven $100,000. And you, as Reuven's sort of proxy, I want you to give me a handkerchief. I'll lift it up in your presence, and I'm hereby generating a debt. So that is perfectly legal for them to sign on because they're bearing accurate testimony that on such and such a date, Shimon indebted himself to Reuven. Afal pi shelo yalvabo And so therefore they can write it, they can give that note to Shimon, and Shimon can hold on to that note for as long as he wants. He can give it to the creditor without borrowing any money, if that's what, let's say, he wants to do because he trusts the creditor, but he just wants to show good faith, so the creditor will lend him the money. He says that we've already covered. You're allowed to do that because from the moment that the kinyan is made, a debt, Shimon has generated a debt regardless of whether he ever actually borrows the money. So therefore, if for convenience, Shimon comes over to us as witnesses and he says, guys, listen, I'm going to Reuven's house. He told me I've got to have all the paperwork ready. I've got to have everything signed. The only way to do it is if the witnesses say, okay, then make a kinyan. Here's a handkerchief. You hereby indebt yourself to give $100,000 to Reuven, regardless of whether he gives you the money or not. Regardless of whether it lends you. That's the only way that they can actually sign, unless he brings them along to see the actual loan. But this would be one way of solving that problem, but it does put Shimon at risk. It basically means that he's generated a debt to Reuven, and even if Reuven never lends him the money, he's still on the hook to pay that amount, unless, of course, he never tells anyone about that debt, destroys the paper, and then the creditor never knows about it. The question then would be an interesting question. Is he chayiv from a heavenly perspective? He's generated a debt. Will Hashem hold him liable for having generated a debt and never having made good on it? It seems like he would be on the hook, at least from a heavenly perspective, although maybe the argument could be made is that it's clear that he only generated this debt with the expectation of getting money in exchange. So I'm not so sure about that. Maybe we'll see something in the commentary.
Even though you don't look at
The Kenyan union. No, but that's the point. The paper is not reflecting upon the loan. The paper is reflecting upon a debt that is generated. And therefore, even if the shtar was written a week before he's planning to borrow the money, as long as he makes a kinyan in front of the witnesses, indebting himself to the creditor, then anything else that's written on it, I believe. They were witnesses to the kinyan. That's right. That's right. That's correct.
The date from which they collect. That's what we were worried about.
Right, but here,
on the loan date,
right? No, it's not based on the loan date because I believe it's not. I believe that what's happening is that he's generating a debt from today. Unless it was structured in such a way that I only want this debt to take effect when it comes into the hands of the creditor. But what the witnesses would be signing to is that we were present when the kinyan was made, right? That's right. That's right. There's no proof that the loan was made, but the debt would still be generated. Oral testimony is admissible to the Beis Din. That's right. That's right.
now we're saying he's on the book with the delivery.
That's right.
The farm, delivery statement, holds in place. Effectively, he has a public announcement, he's gonna give this lot of money.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to get further crystallization of this idea as we go through this halacha. Ela bishik kavar hilvehu. The witnesses cannot sign unless they see the loan. And he says, Ayin b'biurim the divrei harav kan sarachiyim. He says, it's a little bit strange, the language of the Rav Shulchan Aruch, as we'll clarify. The mashmos haposkim degam im ha'idim lo ro'im ha'alva klal. It seems like from the commentaries that even if the witnesses never see the loan, mikol makom shari lahem lichto v'lachtom, they still are allowed to sign on it. The miyad sheba ashtar liyad hamalva nishtabed halova b'nechasav kilo haya nasa kinyan. Because even if no kinyan was made, once the lova gives the piece of paper to the malva, it says that in itself is the enactment of a kinyan, and therefore, why can't the witnesses sign at that point when they see the shtar changing hands from the lova to the malva, from the borrower to the lender? Okay. So we're going to come back to this Amir Tzashem tomorrow. We'll continue this discussion. All right, have a great day.